Hello, everyone, once again to an episode of Fair Dialogues. We are in, I don't know, week 13, 16. I have no idea, but I feel we are doing this on a very intense style. We have had amazing guests in the past couple of weeks. We have a great lineup up to, I think, almost February now. So they're catching on. I love to see more people joining. I'm looking a little bit at the live here, but if you're joining for the first time, just tell us where you're joining from and share a little bit of a story. What's interesting for you and why are you here today? I am very very happy to have somebody quite special. Mateus is here with us. Welcome, Mateus.
Hello, welcome everyone. Just a little bit of technical. I'm not used to this platform, so I might be missing some message. Let me know. But hello everyone. Very happy to be here.
I will read everything we get. For those joining maybe the first time, Fair Dialogues is accompanying all efforts from faircultures.com. This is a new endeavor that we launched to support organizations building more inclusive workplaces. And the very important thing is to follow us and pay attention to when we launch the Fair Barcelona, the European Annual Workplace Inclusion Conference that we are launching second edition soon, sometimes next week, up and coming. But till then, we're having conversations with experts in workplace leadership and talent methodologies and the future of work and anything that has to do with our experience as workers, let's say so, on this planet, and this journey that we have for growth, development, figuring out our professional purpose, but also growing as individuals while we navigate relationships in the workplace, and seeking somehow to always maybe better ourselves, not just professionally and from a skill perspective, but also from a human to human relationship perspective. I am very grateful to Claude. I'm going to give him a small shout out here because he introduced me to Mateus, and we had a lovely conversation about how much we both value the idea of contributing actively, proactively, continuously to workplace inclusion. And I had to have you, Mateus, on the call. You have such an extensive experience in leadership and specifically in a world that is kind of guiding where we move forward, which is the tech world. And I know you're also very keen to stay in the same space of innovation and collaboration, but with a very, very human touch. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Tell us a little bit more about your parkour until now, and then we'll jump into our conversation, which is about allyship and how people like you can really contribute to workplace inclusion.
The long story short, I'm working for more than 27 years now. It's a little bit long, but I'm a technologist. I started as a software developer, and after several pathways, for the last 10 years, I'm acting as country CEO of technology business. So my last work was leading a technology business in Spain. Before that, I did the same in Ecuador. Before that, I did the same in Brazil. And I always bring with me a little bit of, in everything I do, how can I try to, besides impacting the business, which is the job,
Mhm.
also impact the environment in terms of belonging, inclusion. It's something that, as we spoke before, I'm passionate. So
Yeah.
I always try to bring a little bit of that in everything we do. Luckily for me, the last company also valued that. So when you work in a place that matches your values, it's like the perfect storm for that, right?
For
And
sure.
that's what I've been doing so far.
And it's a very interesting journey from what you're from our conversation, because first of all you have such a rich geographical perspective. We talk about cultures being defined by where they're being built, by language, by customs, by way of actually appreciating, let's say, power or hierarchy, but also innovation and autonomy. There are so many factors when we define, let's say, regional cultures. But then you also worked in organizations that are very intentional about building their internal culture, right? So there's a corporate individual culture that you need to add on top of who the people are and try to make that work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, not all the time is actually going well. We have a lot of situations that we keep discussing in this industry around how tech has been traditionally quite excluding certain demographics, specifically the gender conversation. If we look at the gender balance in tech, it's still an ongoing struggle, but very much in leadership as well, no matter the industry, and so many other categories that in the same time tech might actually have been doing pretty well, for example, when it comes to neurodiversity, and maybe a little bit more welcoming to that versus other industries, right? So we give and take. But the reality is that there is a lot of work to do, and especially when you're in positions like yours where you need to build teams responsible for many different clients, but also regionally relevant. If you are leading a country branch or an organization that is building teams in a specific style, ultimately you try to be mindful about building good teams and teams that are diverse and are creating that, let's say, innate instinct to innovate together and to go beyond differences and benefit from those ones, right?
Yeah.
But there is a certain ask from leaders to be allies in whatever is needed to be covered as a gap, whether it's a gender gap, whether it's any type of um, um, stereotyping and people not necessarily having access to these jobs, which are extremely valuable, right? How do you personally define allyship in tech? How, yeah, why should leaders care?
Yeah. I think, like, before the definition, let's paint a picture together. The ideal word, and I don't think anyone will disagree with that, is a word in which, let's talk about work because it's the topic here. It's a work environment in which all voices are heard. And
Mhm.
by all voices, I mean all
All voices.
voices. And all people, all human beings on that company, they feel heard, they feel respected,
Mhm.
and they feel they have fair recognition and opportunities,
Mhm.
regardless of background, color of the skin, or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Age, gender. So that's the ideal scenario. So what's allyship in that context for me? For me, allyship is to recognize and act on two things.
Mhm.
First, we are still far away from that ideal scenario, unfortunately. So we have biases that are embedded in the fabric of the society, and that enters our processes in the companies. So to keep an example in tech, probably you all heard a while back about this big technology company that was using algorithms on their recruitment processes. And then very fast they learned that the algorithms will say that men are better engineers than women. The reason for that is that they use historical data for the training, and the
Sure.
historical data was biased. By the way, the company recognized it and fixed it. That's the
Correct.
path. That's the way to go. So recognizing the first thing, we still
Mhm.
have a lot to do to get to that ideal scenario. So we need to proactively bring some changes, bring some initiatives together. And
Mhm.
the second thing we should recognize and act on is our place in that, especially leaders. Like,
Yeah.
we have a lot of power. That's the truth. Sometimes the expressions we use after 1 year, you see that people are using the expressions.
Mhm.
Not only defining the policies, but we set examples. So understanding that it's in our power to change that. When you recognize these two things and you act on that,
Mhm.
I think that's allyship. The second part, why should leaders care? We could talk a lot, and maybe we should talk a lot the benefits for the business. So we can
Yeah.
follow up. But now, blunt answer, because it's the right thing to do. You have a choice. You need to make your job. That's your job. You need to do it. You need to do it right.
Yeah.
So you have a choice. Either you do it with a positive impact or with a negative impact. So we should choose the positive. It's the right thing to do.
I mean, I want to agree with you on this one around like is the right thing to do. And I think at least surface level, nobody necessarily has an intention to not do the right thing, right? But yesterday I was actually reading the anti-discrimination law from the Spanish government, and there were a couple of sections there, like what is considered kind of the fault of an individual if there is a case, and the leadership of companies is secondary responsible as well when incidents of this type are happening. And one of these, so they were like the active things, harassment, discrimination, etc., etc. But there was also the inactive piece, which is like inaction.
Yeah.
The inaction can be punishable if you have noticed pay gap recurrently in your organization and you haven't acted on it. You could be held liable. If you have witnessed any type of incidents or have been brought to your attention and you haven't been acting on them, like this inaction is also very clear somehow. So I would say a lot of the reason where things go wrong is the inaction more than, let's say, intent to do the wrong thing, right? But it is the same effect sometimes.
Totally agree. And I think in principle, this legislation, I was not aware, by the way, but in principle, I think it makes sense because when I said you have a choice to do the right thing or to do the bad thing,
Mhm.
because I think in this specific case, there is no middle ground.
Mm-mm.
Because in cases of oppression,
Mhm.
doing nothing is picking a side.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
in principle, I
exactly.
agree that if we see the injustice, we need to work to fix it.
Yeah, and it's a direct responsibility. Let's go to the business case. We have seen so many studies, especially in the past 10 years. I would say, starting probably with McKinsey, who's done some very interesting research on what happens when we have diverse teams when it comes to gender, and then there's another piece of research when it's more diverse in ethnicities, and then now more and more is being dug up in terms of like intersectional diversity, age, etc., etc. They give us different perspectives and, let's say, the bottom line, the different benefits of the business. What have you seen as being the real, you've been running massive tech operations, what was it in for you, right? If you think beyond your moral high ground and your kind of ethics, good spine that you put in place, but you still had to run a business, you still had to make a business profitable, you still had to make decisions on a day-to-day basis that could take you either way, right? And this, we're talking about hiring decisions, promotions decisions, prioritization of resources decisions, etc., etc. Yeah, what's your take on the business case?
Yeah. I think it's very important to touch this point because, as I said, for the first question, it's like we should do it because it's correct. Now, when you
Mhm.
get to reality and you have a business to run, there are several moving pieces, several stakeholders, and etc. Something I learned along the way is that maybe in the beginning I was a little bit more naive
Mhm.
because someone would tell me, "Give me the numbers, give me the return of investment, give me the plan," and I was kind of, "Why? Like, it's the right thing to do. Why do you want those things?" After some time, I learned that it's even easier for us to do those things if we
Mhm.
can talk and convey the value for all the stakeholders,
Yeah.
because they're all doing their jobs as well. They see different parts of the business. So when we can connect and find some pathways to show the value for the business, for the bottom line,
Mhm. Mhm.
at the end of the day, is not only necessary, but it makes our job as allies
Mhm.
easier.
Mhm.
So what I've been seeing, it's pretty much what we see on the studies, but on the real life. So
Mhm.
the main values I see, and if I forgot some, you can interrupt me and I'll
No,
tell
no,
you
I want to hear
if
what
it's on
you've
that or not.
witnessed
Yeah.
because we
So
have different experiences, and this is the interesting part of these calls. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. The main values I see, I think the first one, it's productivity.
Uh-huh.
There is this study from Google. It's not about diversity. It's called Project Aristotle.
Mhm.
They use it a bunch of data to try to find what makes a team a high performance team.
Yeah.
and then you have the whole results there. And they found one common characteristic in all high performance teams, what they called in the study psychological safety.
Yeah.
So all the high performance teams, they have that characteristics, which mean they feel free to be themselves. They feel free to be genuine. They feel free to make mistakes, to express their voices. It's not really, they don't, I don't remember that in the study they say specifically about diversity, but it is. So
Yeah.
psychological safety means that everyone feels safe in that environment.
Totally.
And so they say that the teams are more productive, and I
Mhm.
see that on day by day. The other thing I see is that diverse teams create more diverse products
Yes.
because you have more ideas, more backgrounds, more, and also diverse teams create more inclusive products.
Mm-hmm.
And if I include more things, more people, I am also making my product to be able to reach more. So the market share
Yeah.
increases.
Yeah.
As a quick example on that, about diverse teams creating inclusive products, I was working for this big airlines a couple of years back, and they needed to make their software inclusive for blind people.
Mm-hmm.
So they came to us for help, and the product owner was talking to me, and he said,
Mm-hmm.
since we are doing it, we want to do it right.
Yeah.
We want to do it not just for show, but to make our product inclusive. And then they had the product there. It was passing the tests according
Mm-hmm.
to the legislation
Mm-hmm.
of the country. What we did was to staff blind engineers to that team because they want to create a product for blind people.
Sure.
And we realized that all the requirements that was passing the
Uh-huh.
legislation went back to the backlog, went back
Mm.
because although technically speaking, all the
Yeah.
images had the alternative text, all the software was you were able to navigate using keyboard and etc.
Mm-hmm.
But the sum of the parts didn't make sense. The person
Especially the user
wasn't able.
experience was not there. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
person was not able to buy a ticket.
Yeah.
So when you have a blind person working on the team, that product will be automatically inclusive for blind
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The
We
test
have,
is done at creation, basically, right?
yeah,
And
the
it's
creation.
done for the user. Yes.
So and there is many more stories like that,
Mm-hmm.
but this one
Mm-hmm.
for the airlines happened with me with my
Mm-hmm.
team. So the second thing I see is that so productivity is one, creating more diverse, more innovative, and more inclusive
Mm-hmm.
products is two, and then the brand awareness and the power of your brand as a business.
Yeah.
When you are seen as a company that does those things, you start to see a relation with attraction of talent, retention of talents, and even clients.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, not necessarily they will hire you because of that, but
You
you
get
have
an extra
companies.
brownie point.
Yeah, all things being the same, your
Sure.
brand can be more powerful.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
So I see
Because
that
people do.
happening a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Yes.
And as we said in the beginning, in three countries, three cultures, three contexts. So yeah,
So on one side, especially as a tech leader, you do have the power somehow to be mindful about how you create your teams, and especially if you need to solve real technological problems for different clients, there is an opportunity to always put the inclusion hat and say, is this gonna be good for everybody? Is this gonna exclude anybody from having this experience like everybody else? And I think that's a huge responsibility to start with, even just this, making your products better. And I want to recommend a book. It's called Invisible Women. It's very much focused on maybe innovation that was missed when women were not included, but then it's full of examples when, let's say, different products from healthcare to appliances to anything else, when they had the additional perspective. And what I love about all these type of examples that you can find in that book, and especially the one that you also shared, the how could I say, the hypothesis, or probably the axiom is like, when you build for inclusion, everybody benefits, not just, let's say, the category that maybe would have missed out. So everybody starts seeing an improvement in their experience of using such product or service or interacting with various organizations. So I love the fact that it all kind of comes together. And because I think there is a lot of like, oh, but why should we make this specifically for this category? I'm like, it's gonna benefit everybody one way or another, right? So there's that piece where, as a tech leader, you can shape your teams, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes, organizations are very big, they're very matrixy. Everybody has their own pockets of control and power, as you were saying, but you can still be a driver of inclusion, and you can still be an influencer. You can still be somehow an ally at scale, maybe more, where your area of direct control about who you hire, who you promote, it's not there, right? Do you have an example, maybe in your experience, where you you kind of apply this allyship throughout the rest, or trying to influence other leaders, the other peers, other parts of the business? And how is that relationship? Because I think there, it's a bit different than doing it for your own teams and your own kind of territory.
Yes, it is. I had both, like when I
Yeah.
was leading at a project level, but also as the country CEO, which was my latest experience. And again, luckily, I was in a company that also aligns on this value. So
Mhm.
maybe I was
It
privileged.
helps.
Yeah. But I think the key when we want to bring the change at scale,
Hmm.
it's to make diversity a strategic priority
Hmm.
for your business, and to make sure yourself as a leader and your teams are accountable for that.
Hmm.
So it's not a nice to have, it's not a silo,
Hmm.
but it's part of the strategy
Hmm.
of the business for several reasons, including those ones we spoke about: retention, brand awareness, more
Yeah.
productive teams. So we should make a case that it makes sense for the business, but
Hmm.
make it a strategic priority, and then create accountability on it. Hold yourself and your teams accountable for the results.
I mean, it's true. Whenever I had the chance to develop programs to influence the representation of categories that generally are excluded from tech, or from leadership roles, underrepresented for different reasons in different countries, the biggest success, the biggest movement of the needle when the C level was at least 70% on board. So everybody was either sponsoring specific actions, was either advocating, downstream, was finding resources to put behind these things. So I think when you say put this on your strategic agenda, for me, whenever I think about strategy, and I'm going to throw another book there because this is actually a recent one that I'm reading. It's called Bad Strategy, Good Strategy, and I love it because it's so down to earth, and it brings the a bit the more human conversation to what is strategy. And strategy is doing things.
Yeah,
So it's like, yes, I kind of I make the plan, or I put a certain aspiration about doing something, but the idea is to actually do it. And what is it that you would think, if you're meeting tomorrow, the I don't know, here in Barcelona, Glovo, or I don't know, booking.com in Amsterdam, or any, Spotify in Sweden, and you meet an engineering manager, and they're like, hey, I would like to do a little bit more, but I just don't know what would you ask, what would you advise them to start with when it comes to allyship and changing these dynamics?
I have to say that strategy is execution.
Hmm.
Like a anti-pattern that I see as a consultant, when take the
Yeah.
diversity aside, when I go to a client, one anti-pattern I see a lot is when the strategy is in a ivory tower.
Hmm.
It's beautiful on the PowerPoint, but it's totally disconnected from the operations.
Yeah.
And then they think the strategy is wrong, and they change it the last year, and they change
Hmm.
again, they change again. But then you look at it, none of those strategies was never put in place.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally agree. Strategy is execution. Now, when you talk about strategy and etc., as if we have the buy-in of the leaders is the perfect scenario,
Yeah.
it's not always the case. It doesn't mean that you can't bring some safety and some security to your own team, right?
Yeah.
We need to try to change the leadership,
Mm-hmm.
but meanwhile, it's always possible to do some things.
Mm-hmm.
And the main advice I would give is that the change starts within oneself. You
Okay.
need to break your own biases. You need to understand what allyship is, understand
Mm-hmm.
that you have the power to do some things.
Mm-hmm.
So my first recommendation before going to designing processes and etc. would be listen. Go
Mm-hmm.
there tomorrow, talk to your team, listen to them,
Yeah.
actively listen, not listen to answer, not listen to have a reply. Ask them
Yeah.
what
What's
could be
missing?
better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you start changing yourself. After that, you look at the processes and etc. But the first thing I would suggest is go there and listen.
Mm-hmm.
Schedule an hour and see what they suggest you to do better.
Now you're actually reminding me of a couple of other instances when I've seen real progress happening is exactly when these kind of listening tables we were doing some uh, first of all we kind of would collect data from time to time on engagement, on satisfaction, things that are good and useful for many different reasons, but then we would splice them by different demographics, age, time in the organization, gender, whatever we could, because some of this data is not easily to split. But if you can, I do advise it. It's super strong to really understand who's happy, who's not happy, and why.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
Let
really
me
kind
tell
of
you
yeah,
a small story. This one was on my last job here in Spain.
yeah.
We had a delivery health dashboard for the projects.
Mm-hmm.
So each project, each account would present us the leadership in a quarterly basis. A
Mm-hmm.
dashboard with like green, red, and yellow for several things.
Dimensions, yeah.
Yeah, dimensions. So they would say how are their margin, client succession, dates, delivery, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to include some metrics for inclusion of specifically women. It was
Mm-hmm.
the strategy at that moment. And then as the leadership team, we had a very small metric to start with and then learn with that. So
Mm-hmm.
we said, if your project has zero representation, you have a red in your dashboard. If you have one, you have a yellow, and if you have
Mm-hmm.
more than one person, you have
Mm-hmm.
a green. And
Mm-hmm.
then we started. And people want to do their job, they want to do it right. So
Sure.
after the metric was there, you see the thing propagating.
Yeah.
Then we had a round of conversations. And the women were not feeling secure because what that caused was to spread it too thin. So
Mm-hmm.
we started to have one woman in a project full of men,
Mm-hmm.
and it was not a safe place. So after talking and listening, we changed the metric, and now the red is to have only one
Mm-hmm.
representative of any kind of diversity, and
Yes.
the green is to have more than one. So it's a very simple example, but it's how we start with something,
Mm-hmm.
learn, and improve.
And improve. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I could go into a lot of things, but I want to stick to our topic. And I think we've talked a lot about what you can do, what you've been doing, what you've been seeing, what are the good things of being a genuine ally and pushing strategy, pushing execution in this space. I don't want to shy away. Yesterday, I was having a dinner with a person I was just meeting, and they knew a little bit what I was doing. We just say hello, exchange two things, and then she starts pouring how she's a leader in an organization, oil and gas, very very let's say gender specific as well, right? But she's been successful. She's been like a great ally for many years, but she was extremely disappointed with the fact that despite this volunteer work, despite this influencing work, despite, let's say, the push from many people in the organization, the effects are limited or superficial. And she was like, at some point, I gave up. And these are real challenges, right? These are real challenges that come with frustration, disappointment, and lack of impact. And maybe I want to hear from your side, what what has been the biggest challenge for you, the hardest part in building this genuine allyship in tech? And maybe we don't talk enough about it, because maybe even us in talent who are maybe here listening, we're a little bit outside of those rooms. So
Mhm.
if you care to share, because I know there are many naysayers, I know there is a lot of resistance for good or bad reasons. It's a bit of everything. But your experience, what does it tell you? Where are these challenges? Why?
Yeah. You look at two perspectives. One,
Mm-hmm.
it's more changing the individual,
Mm-hmm.
like making the person understand what's happening and that their decisions make sense. And it's for everyone, right? It's a journey. We are learning every day. I'm sure you are as well. I had several feedbacks that made me grow, so that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
If you want, I can share some stories on that
Yes,
part, but I
please.
think the
Yeah.
other is more interesting, probably.
Uh-huh.
For the business, for the business, I think the main challenge is to, one, don't lose what we did so far,
Mm.
and also don't be able to pick up again when we need to reduce investments because
Mm-hmm.
of some
Yeah,
economic situation. So let's
sure.
see.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is great. The market is in expansion. The We are
Everybody's
delivering
happy, going
quarterly
on holiday.
results. Yeah, quarterly results every year. The stock market is happy. The investors are happy. The board
Yeah.
of directors are happy. At that moment, it's easier.
Mm-hmm.
But business are cyclical. At some
Mm-hmm.
points, we will have hard times for business,
Yeah.
and they will cut investments. They will cut priorities
Mm-hmm.
all across the board. It's not picking up
Mm-hmm.
on social change or diversity. They will also cut
Yes, I know.
innovation,
Of course.
cut
Yes, I agree with you there.
everything.
It's along everything. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So when that happens, when the business is in bad shape and we need to cut investments, how do we make sure that everything we did so far
Mm-hmm.
is not lost?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the key to that is that we need to make the changes part of the culture, part of the
Mm.
what we do, so that
Mm-hmm.
the diversity until the point we reach it already, it's not a effort anymore. It's already natural. It's second nature. So
It's part of
this
the day to
helps
day.
us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if it's day-to-day business as usual, it helps us not to lose anything.
Yeah.
But then being able to pick it up again
Mm-hmm.
when things are back to normal. So
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
handling this, and it same applies for innovation or for
Mm-hmm.
R&D. When the business is not in a good shape,
Mm-hmm.
that's the main challenge.
I can see that, and I also, I maybe I'm just sharing with you all my life stories as well. But to be honest, when I started on this journey, when maybe more than 10 years almost, there were no budgets for this, you know, specific programs, especially in Europe. In the US, yes, of course, but as you say, I think it was more around the energy and the power that people had versus the financial resources. And when you do a hiring process to grow a team of 100 engineers, it's still going to take you a year or more, right? Sometimes, and it's like you have time that could be your currency. when it comes to doing the right thing, building diverse pipelines, fixing your process if it's broken, and it's selecting a specific type of persona, right? All of these things. And I think we forget about this level of investment that we can do, which is time. We're actually going to have a session on that with Raquel next week, specifically on what does it look like when we give more time to create change for people experience and for inclusive hiring, promotions, etc., etc. So I do appreciate you're saying there is a cyclical situation, and it's fine when we will have maybe a step or two back, but we should never go back to zero.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And if it's part of the culture, if it's
Yes.
part of the recruitment process, if it's not an effort anymore, and
Yeah.
then it's easier, right? But
Yeah, for
thinking
sure.
about that is important.
Okay. um we started talking a little bit about business and the business goals, which sometimes are very, very aggressive, right? Like we try to go to market fast, we need to build product fast, we need fast, 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 right? So then we clash with this idea that, hey, we need some time to change mindsets, to revise processes, to kind of create new things, and balance out what was not necessarily so good in the past. But your stakeholders or your markets like go, 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 go. Any particular perspective on your side, how to balance that, how to, yeah.
The ideal scenario is when you can show that value for the business that we spoke a
Yeah.
while. You can show those pathways
Uh-huh.
to the bottom line,
Yeah.
so that doing inclusion, it's not a competition for the business,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lever
Mm-hmm.
for the business. I
Mm-hmm.
remember a while back, I was watching a presentation of the my previous boss, Carol Sintra. She was my boss, and she was answering some questions related to this. And someone asked, "How can you run such a successful business while doing the right things?"
Mm-hmm.
And she answered, "Probably I'm having a successful business because I'm doing the right things." And that
Yeah.
stuck with me. So the key to that situation is to make sure everyone understands the values for the
Mm-hmm.
business of
Yes.
doing this.
And I love the way you're flipping it. I think this is somehow missing sometimes in conversations with leadership tables around like, oh, but why are we doing this? And the question is like, why are we not doing this?
Yeah,
Because it does set you up for success in a more organic way eventually, and in a way that you can build even more on top of that when you have people with diverse perspectives, with lived experiences, with priorities, with values and purpose, right? And you're missing out on that if you're not
yeah,
doing it.
I agree. But it's not an easy conversation. It
No.
requires the, let's say, the allies.
Finesse.
Yeah, it requires the folks wanting to grow the diversity agenda,
Hmm.
to speak the language of the business,
Hmm.
to have the proper metrics, to understand finance, to understand budgeting.
Yeah.
Because if you just go with my beginning of this conversation, it's the right thing to do,
Hmm.
it's probably not enough. So you need to know the language so that you can educate the business to understand that it's good for the business.
And this is making me think again, which are the leaders that I worked with and they've managed to make that change is because they were, first of all, exceptional business people. So they did understand all these metrics, but they also knew the nuances. If I speak to the board versus with the CFO versus with maybe a governmental institution versus with the union, how do I balance those conversations? But in the same time, I think what was top of mind was I'm not leaving these rooms without making this a priority. And I've seen them changing the fabric of the internal employee values, like the behaviors that were dictating general day-to-day collaboration, creation, etc. But also the products. They fundamentally changed the what the business was producing and made it better. Yeah, super super clear there in terms of like you need them to be educated on
Yeah,
all these topics in a
yeah.
way. Yeah, you.
It's not
Mhm,
their responsibility to understand the impact
mhm,
of diversity. Sorry, but it's not.
mhm.
It's your responsibility to
To bring
make
it.
them understand, right? That's how
Mhm.
you influence. And for that, you need metrics, you need numbers. So
Totally.
it's not easy, but
Yeah.
it's the way to go.
Even for myself, I mean, I don't want to say I was manipulating, but I was manipulating my speech. If I would go to a CTO and speak about we can do these changes in the recruitment process, we can do these changes in the internal mobility around retention, and this will be the impact for your teams. I would speak about particularly performance, collaboration, innovation. If I would go to the CFO
Retention,
to say, yeah, I would go to the CFO and say, "Hey, we have some plans to improve representation, to improve sentiment, to improve retention, to improve for these categories. This is going to save us X amount of money, or this is going to bring us an acceleration of extra." So the purpose was the same, but the conversation angle, some most of the time, it was different.
you help them to help you, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
So
yes, yes.
it makes it's easy for everyone.
We brought a little bit this idea of retention. I think this is a big challenge in tech. We've seen it and we see it. We sometimes manage to increase representation in tech, specifically for gender, neurodiversity, LGBTQ, disability. We're starting to do some good things. A cycle or two goes by and we start losing them. We call that, I don't know how it's in English, where this thing where there's a strainer. So where you clear your pasta water, you've put things in there, but then they start leaking out and they leave your organization, and you haven't reached that potential that we keep talking about, right? What have you observed about retention? What do you do? What do you advise us to do, from a tech leadership position, to increase retention, to be mindful of that? It's very costly and very painful and very disruptive for teams when they have people leaving en masse, and especially when we signal that, hey, we keep losing the women in the team, we keep losing the mothers in the team, we keep losing, right? I
Yeah.
don't know if you've noticed this, but this is a little bit a painful reality that, at least on the talent side, we have to deal with.
Something I detected in two of the business I led, it happened in Brazil and in Spain. It was a clear correlation between diversity, inclusion, and belonging
Mhm,
metrics and retention.
mhm.
So the more you score high on belonging and inclusion, the better was our retention. It
Yeah.
happened like clearly. That being said, I see two main reasons for when we lose the groups that we want to include, the diversity that we want to increase. First is when the company works only on diversity, but not on inclusion.
Mm.
So what is important for them is to increase their numbers, probably for show, I don't know. But then,
Compliance, a lot of different reasons. Yes.
yeah. And then inside the company, they don't track how is the promotion, how is the recognition. Do you have, let's continue talking about gender. Do
Mm.
you have diversity in all the leadership levels?
Yeah.
Are the salaries the same? Do you have gender salary gap? So
Mhm.
the first reason I see is when you work in diversity but not on inclusion. The
Correct.
second is when the market picks up, and
Mhm.
that happened to me for a
Mm.
long while. We were hiring diversity that happened in Porto Alegre, and the diverse part of the community was not leaving our company, and we were
Mhm.
happy until eventually they start to leave. And then what realized is that suddenly all of other companies were also wanting to include women.
Yep.
So I decided to stop, and my camera is.
It's
I
moving with
decided,
you.
yeah, I decided to stop worrying about that one.
Okay.
Because in the beginning, as the manager of the country, I
Mhm.
was, oh my God, I'm losing people. And then I was,
Mhm.
you know what? I always lost white heterosexual men.
Mhm.
And now the diversity groups are also being hired
Mhm.
by the other companies.
True.
So go be happy. So
Mhm.
I see these two patterns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think in a way that's where you want to be. You want to be in an ecosystem where
Yeah.
all talent is desired and hunted and right and included in these high stakes businesses and the projects that are growing fast and they give opportunities. So I think that's an interesting perspective. I didn't think much about that. A lot of the times I would be challenged, let's say so, around programs that we would push, and I could see that this it's possible, and we did improve representation specifically for gender in tech in all the organization I was in by significant percentage points. But the beginning of those conversations were like, well, we are in Germany, for example, and computer science graduates who are women are 8%. I'm happy to have 8% in my organization. I'm like, this is not the same.
Yeah.
The pool is super big. You can have 16% if you worked. You can have 26% if you worked for it.
Yeah.
It's not that you have a cap, and this data point of computer science graduates, this changes every, like, it adds people to the market every year. So that particular data point is just not a good argument to have around, oh, but that's why I have 10% in my organization, because the national level of computer science degrees which are belonging to women is the same. I'm like, no, you are the mathematician here, you are the tech person, you should know that that is not the representative data point. But I'm having these conversations continuously, to be honest, which is interesting, but we're always moving past them. That's the important part.
I not only agree with you totally, but it could open a new can of worms, and we won't have time for that. But
Yeah.
I also am a little bit skeptical on hiring only folks for tech
Yes.
that have a diploma in an Ivy League university.
Of
Some
course.
of the better technologists I worked with, they come from social sciences, they come from
Mm.
archaeology. So, but that's probably it's a conversation for
Sure, sure,
another
sure, sure,
hour.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
um what are some of these business metrics, right? Like, if we're thinking about data points that leaders should consider, leaders should pay attention to, leaders should be tracking and understanding, hey, am I building an inclusive workplace or not? Like, what are some metrics that you told us a little bit about the representation with this dashboard example? Anything else except representation?
Yeah, it's hard to for me to give a specific metric. As a consultant, sometimes we also always answer it depends. I
Depends.
would go to the client and understand what works for them. I
Yeah.
don't believe in silver bullet. That being said, I think it's important to measure some different dimensions.
Hmm.
So I spoke a little bit already about the diversity, like just the number of people getting in. It's important,
Hmm.
but
Yes,
not
sure.
only that. You also
Mhm.
need to measure the inclusion and the
Yeah,
belonging.
yeah.
So some kind of measurement in terms of engagement, in
Hmm.
terms of feelings of belonging. We have tools for that
Sure.
currently, right? And it's important to also measure internal fairness in review cycles, in salary reviews, in salaries as an absolute number,
Yeah.
internal opportunities. And that's probably the hardest one. We need to measure the impact on the business so
Mm.
that we can have those conversations there with the
In this
CFO that
next
we
cycle,
spoke about
yes.
and the CEO.
Yeah.
So we need to try to find in which are the pathways in which inclusion will hit my bottom line.
Mhm, mhm,
We
mhm.
need to understand more or less how can they include, and then we need to find which KPIs I can use to measure. It's not always so direct.
No.
Sometimes it will be it will be more a smell, but we can
Mm.
show some correlation. So measure diversity, measure inclusion and belonging, internal fairness, and everything that's related to promotion and salaries,
Mhm.
and then the impact on the business. Those would be the dimensions we should measure. But
Yeah.
let's not overcomplicate and try to do it all on the day one, right? Start. Just start. Start small
Yeah.
and learn and grow. Otherwise, you can be on the drawing board forever.
It can be intimidating for organizations, especially more, let's say, small, medium size. Like, oh, but who's gonna do this? I'm like, the same person who's doing any other metric measurement to to the business, right? You have somebody taking care of marketing metrics. You have somebody taking care of productivity metrics. You have somebody like you will probably find that's one kind of blocker I usually see, like who's gonna take care of this. And the second part, I think somehow, as you say, each business is very different. This is a little bit what I want to remind and everybody that I talk to. You cannot just copy paste. If you, Mateusz, have done this at Thoughtworks and then you go into another organization, your metrics or your kind of combination will look different for the right reasons, most likely. So personalize, look inside, take what you have first. And we do a lot of these audits with organizations to understand where are they in their DEI journey, in their maturity level. And it's very interesting. We actually do an analysis, which is not SWOT analysis, but it's SOAR. Like, you have some things that you can be proud of. You've been doing them, so you have some strengths there. But maybe you don't. The gaps are more aspirations, are more opportunities that you can see. So you don't necessarily need to kind of get bogged in this. It's like, oh, this I will never fix. This is a problem we will always have. This is a marketing I cannot change. Like, oh, a market is challenging. Let's see that as an opportunity. What can we actually influence? And I loved your perspective. Like, just it's not gonna work copy pasting for sure.
Even in the same company, and not
Yeah.
even in the same
Yeah.
in 2 different years. I mean, cultures evolve,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. That's the
So
purpose.
yeah,
Yes. Hmm.
we need to understand the context and do what's possible there and improve. Always improving. I think that's the key. It's
Hmm.
not to have all the answers on, before we start. It's about being able to learn along the way
Hmm.
and improve.
How do you find your own allies in an organization? So let's say we've seen enough of you being one, knowledgeable about the topic, passionate about the topic, have experienced different situations when if you worked on this, it was better for you, better for your team, better for your company. But my discovery was like, even if I am, let's say, extremely effective and always learning, etc., etc., I will never be able to manage change by myself. So I had to find other allies within the organization. How do you select your own allies in this type of format? I'm curious what's your tactic here, because I take anybody who wants to help out, but maybe.
Yeah. I think it's different. Like if you are in the leadership position and you make it part of the strategic
Mhm,
direction of the company, it's not so hard because
mhm,
eventually it's top down somehow.
mhm,
Now, in the other case, let's think about other companies that I worked with, not Thoughtworks.
mhm.
For me, it is about communicating and letting people know that you care,
Yeah.
letting people know that you are passionate by it, maybe open spaces if they don't exist.
Mhm,
And then you the network effect happens. You will start to see people. Not only about this passion of mine. Like a while back, I gave a talk inside the company about
mhm,
introversion because I'm the
mhm,
complete introvert and shy person. It's amazing. And I spoke about that.
mhm.
I received so many compliments and people coming to me and making groups to talk
Related.
about it because I spoke.
Yeah.
So speak about it. Let people know
Mhm.
about your passion. Let people know that you want to do something. And hopefully you will find some allies. I think you will.
You will, yes. I think this was also my unconscious tactic for a very long time, and then it became a conscious tactic. But you would find me in the elevator after lunch, and you have those 2 minutes till you get to your floor, and you chit chat a little bit. Hey, what are you up to? What are you up to? People that you don't necessarily meet on your floor or in your type of department. Now we're all online, so you kind of need to make an extra effort to reach out to people. But whenever I would find somebody that I don't necessarily speak to very often, and we would get to, hey, what are you up to? I would make sure that there's at least one sentence about I'm dealing with some topics around diversity and inclusion. And then when they needed help, when they heard somebody else needing help, they were like, talk to Anna. And I think you also get the same a little bit, like talk to Mateus. Maybe there is some insight there. Maybe you have a sounding board. Maybe you can create some synergies together. You never know. And there's great value indeed in putting yourself a little bit out there, introvert or not, but even just kind of mentioning and making sure people are aware of that area of action that you want to pursue.
Inside the companies, right? Now that we speak about it, we are having this conversation today because both of us
Yeah,
spoke about that with a common friend, Claude,
correct.
came with us. So yeah,
Correct. We have an Andrea Almeida here, which I guess it's somebody that you know, and is giving you a big shout on the chat LinkedIn. That yeah, he's finding you amazing, and I'm glad you are here with us, Andrea, and you're listening, and you can also carry the torch. Um, I want to end on a high note because I think we had a very, very good conversation. And I really appreciate all your thoughtful insights, but also the efforts that you were able to be a part of. I am quite certain you will be able to drive change moving forward as well. What is this forward looking like to you? You see how the tech is evolving. We're probably now in a mini revolution when it comes to technology, tech talent, type of products that we will build in this area. And I feel that more than ever, we need people with diverse backgrounds, and we need to serve the global groups versus certain market pieces or levels. Yeah, what's your hope for the future when it comes to building teams and building cool stuff?
uh, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
I know that with the whole AI thing, we need to be careful. We need to have people that care. We need to have legislations. But I am optimistic because I am interested about those topics, not only diversity, about positive impact of technology.
Mhm,
Since I was first introduced to this back in the university,
mhm.
96. And I
Some
was an
people
alien.
listening are bored there.
Yeah. And I was an alien in
Yeah,
most of for the first 10 years of my career.
yeah.
If I spoke about those things, like I was the crazy, uh, completely out. It was not in anyone's mind.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
you jump 3 decades in the future, you have legislations, you have working groups, you have people talking about. So if you look uh, take a step back, and look the big picture,
mhm,
I am optimistic. I think we
mhm.
are going in the right direction. There is a lot of work to do. There is a lot of ground to cover, but we'll do that. We'll be able to create a slightly better world, I think.
I appreciate the optimism. I think I'm more or less in the same space as well. But I'm also very aware that we can't just sit back and wait for things to happen. So the participation, the active involvement, the challenging the status quo are probably the only ones who will make this go in the right direction.
Wise man said, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
True.
So the ones in position to make changes should do it.
On that note, Mateus, I want to thank you so much for having this conversation with us. Everybody who's been listening, please connect with Mateus. He's full of experience. First of all, I love the practical approach, but I also love the vision that you have towards a future where we all do a little bit better. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Bye.